All right, we're about to be live.
Got it.
Yo, 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 peace, peace, light and love, truth, light and love to the brothers and sisters that tune in. Always appreciate you. What we're about to do is an ongoing series. We keep saying we're gonna do ongoing series. But we're about to do some ongoing Kemetic conversations related to Kemetic philosophy, African-centered cosmology, and then Afrocentric takes and understanding on the world per se. And so what you're gonna get when you tune in, when you come into this channel, is just that, you understand? And just, expanding upon the conversation of African-centered history, African-centered philosophy, and just an African-centered worldview whenever, you tune into this channel. So give me a second. You understand? And just, expanding. All right. So let me introduce everybody. This is my brother from another mother, Brother Kemetic. Brother, you want to introduce yourself?
My name is Kemetic. I am a traditional priest in various African traditions. I also have been with the Kemetic movement for over 20 years, well over 20 years, actually. I am the founder of 360 in Seattle. It started out as a youth group that allowed various people of colors, but African Americans, if you like to allow the term in particular. And what we did is that we got together with study groups where we learned about culture, political awareness, as well as spiritual science. Okay, we did this back in the 90s. Also, I do healing work, energy work, and I am a diviner. So for those who are interested in learning who their spiritual guides are, I also help out with that in the form of the Yoruba tradition, Congo-based traditions. And yes, for those who are interested in their Kemetic guides, I can help with that as well. So other than that, I'm over here in the Pacific Northwest, Seattle, Washington, where we get a lot of liquid sunshine. Yes, Brother Cosmic is well aware, and you're well aware of the liquid sunshine we get. But one thing I tell people, Seattle, we have our share of liquid sunshine, but it's not like people's houses getting washed down the street over here. So you can come and pay the city a visit from time to time.
Right. Seattle's a beautiful place, and in particular, I guess Seattle's, really moving forward. Me, I'm always going to talk about the Africa Town project in Seattle. So I really do appreciate and can respect the work that Brother Joaquin has put in on that. It's really actually quite amazing when you think about the achievement in reference to the struggles, the wider struggles of the African world. That's really an unprecedented achievement, being able to receive that amount of money to do that type of work. I don't think I can recall any event in Black African American history, that has that, level of achievement. So that there needs to be some, they're doing it. They're documenting it, reporting it, making it known. It needs to be known, across the country, that achievement, and could be set as a model. But Seattle is definitely doing some awesome stuff, some great things. This conversation, I don't want to get into the Will Smith stuff yet or at all. It depends. We can, because that's the hot topic for now. Because when we talked about setting this up, it was a need to get the African-centered, Kemetic perspective out on the board. You know what I'm saying? Because there's the Shrine of Ma'at, they're putting in a lot of work, but they're not the only African-centered group there, and they need to be supported. We need to work as a collective in order to get this understanding of our connection with African culture and African history to the people. So this can be considered, just one effort amongst many that should be done. I think a lot of our elders, a lot of the people that initiated us into this tradition aren't really tech savvy, not really into the internet and so on and so forth. And so this younger generation has taken it over, and they are not trained like the way we are trained for our study, studying information, studying and acknowledging history. And so this YouTube generation that's coming up, they believe they're the first, and they're just not, they're not really acknowledging the connection to Africa that's there. And so it's upon us and our generation, just to really, push this conversation forward that our ancestors and our elders have been working on. So, man, but, because there's some serious misinformation, people just telling bold-faced lies about the connection of Egypt to Africa and African cultural legacies. You know what I'm saying? And so it's and it's a deep-seated hatred almost. It's funny to see.
Yeah, we have a whole lot of things going on here. First of all, a lot of us grew up as Christians, or we grew up with some Judaic type of Abrahamic belief system. So, whether you read the Holy Bible or the Quran, or whether you want to be a Hebrew Israelite, the notion of Kemet, aka Egypt or Mizraim, whatever people want to call it, as being this evil empire who enslaved God's people. That's one problem, right? And the fact of the matter is that African-American experience has allowed us or caused us to identify with the Hebrews, because it appears to be talking about the same things that we have gone through, right? And I mean, anybody who would read the Bible and see what Black people in America have gone through would relate to that situation. You see, being under an oppressive regime where the women are being spared, the children are being murdered, or the children are being taken as slaves, and men being murdered. That is what we see happening to us. So then we take that and say, oh, well, this is prophecy. This is us. And we identify with that. The thing about it is that we look at it as being a historical event that applies to us now, but we don't look at the symbolism behind it, right? So then not only do we end up rejecting Egypt or Kemet, but you also start rejecting everything that we identify as being connected to Kemet, right? They call Kemet is also known as Kem, and they also say that there's a connection to the word Kem and Ham. Africa is known as the land of Ham. Ham is said to have, disrespected his father, who was drunk and unclad, right? And he went and got his brothers, and his brothers turned their heads away and put the cover over him. And then the father, who was Noah, not Abraham, but Noah. My apologies. Noah wakes up angry and he says, "Cursed be Canaan." He didn't even curse Ham; he cursed Canaan, which is a particular people who was of the children of Ham. But the legend gets misconstrued, and next thing you know, all of Africa is seen as not only the land of Ham, but the land of idol worship, paganism, and beliefs that are not consistent with reality, because it has nothing to do with what they consider to be the one God, or they have demonized these variations of divinity that we call deities, that we call Neteru, Orisha, Vodun spirits, and so forth. Abosam, what have you. You see? So we have to take a look at what is it that African people were doing before we were introduced to the Abrahamic faiths and so forth. And unfortunately, a lot of us will blame the deities and the ancestors for allowing us to have gone through this experience. But there's always a lesson to be learned with everything that goes on this planet.
I really, that conversation right there really irritates me. You know what I'm saying? They're like, well, if Egypt was so great, why did it fall? Everything rises and falls. You understand? Everything has its growth, its development, its maturity, and then its decline. Like that's ridiculous.
Right.
If Egypt, and you get confronted with that conversation a lot with these brothers that follow the Hebrew Israelite understanding, which is really weird. Like that's not a logical conversation, but it's not logic that they're coming with. But you touched upon something that there's there's people out here that's been harping on one of the conversations that was had recently on Sinetta TV about what were we doing, prior to our engagement with the basically the Judaic faiths, right? And then, they misunderstood the question because they started, the way we answer the question, when you say prior to the Abrahamic faiths, we're looking at prior to 1500 BCE, or not even 1500 years ago, 500 BCE, right? What was our African, because that's when the start of the Abrahamic traditions begin, but in the Islamic traditions. But if you're asking about what were we doing prior to colonialism, then we get into the African traditions, that are being practiced on the continent today. Because what information do we have about that? Now that we have a lot of information, but it's the answering of those two questions, and it's like the time frame. You know what I'm saying? But then the other thing about it as well is if we say what we were doing in Kemetic, we're also saying what we're doing in modern day Africa, because it's a continuity of cultural traditions. Not the same. It's not, and it's not like I'm not in the position that it's not the same. There are similarities. Like I did a presentation the other day where I was talking about the Congo concept of the Mbangi and the Kalunga, arises out of the Mbangi, has a fire that illuminates the Mbangi to bring forth its qualities, right?
Yeah.
What does that sound like to you? What is it? If I were to say that to you as a person that studies Kemetic theology, what theology does that sound like to you?
That sounds a lot like the Memphite theology and the theology of Anu, right? But especially Memphite theology, where you had Atum rise up on top of the primordial hill, Tatinen, which was a form of Ptah, rising from out of the new, in the cosmic waters of undifferentiated energy, or that is no thingness, not nothingness, no thing in particular, but something that had to take form and take shape with the potential of being.
Exactly. And so, so when I spoke about the Congo concept, the cosmological concept, we're also talking about a Kemetic cosmological concept, the continuity of cultural consciousness, and so that's what these brothers, you know what I'm saying? These brothers is just, they have a lack of circumspectual insight. There's something going on, and just, you cannot disconnect the Kemetic legacy from the African cultural heritage. It's just not, it's a connection there, point blank, period. And then I have to do more study on the Bantu, but so the Bantu is an ethnic group that pervades Africa, and so the Bantu cosmological conception is also connected to the Kemetic cosmological conception. So it could very well be, and then I want to make this, and then I need to do more study. Were some of the early Kemites, or was there a Bantu, a Bantu influence, a Bantu connection inside Kemet? Just has an ethnic.
Oh, definitely. There definitely had to have been. Okay, because you look at the Nile Valley and you look at the Nile River and you see how it goes all the way down. You jump across. Go the way down the Nile River and you jump across it, you'll end up in the Congo. You'll end up where the Bantu people thrive. But see, so the thing about it is that Africa. Oh, 1 second. Okay, you still there?
Yeah, I'm good.
Someone was calling in. Okay, so the thing about it is that, it goes all the way down into Uganda and so forth. Then you jump across the Nile Valley, you end up in the central part of Africa. You go into the Congo, Angola, and stuff like that, where a lot of us were actually brought from. We were brought from those areas too. You see, not just Nigeria. But you see, and then you see similarities of like the Kinga symbol of the Bantu people, which is found among the Bakongo, because you got these are all Bantu people of Angola, right? Zaire. All the way down to the Zulus of South Africa, or what they call South Africa now in Zambia, right? The Luo people, all those people are Bantu people.
Right.
You see?
Yeah.
What has happened is that they have divided us up with names and everything else. A lot of Bantu influences reach West Africa. Why wouldn't it have? There was a trade route that stretched all the way across those particular areas. You see what I mean? Somali people are considered a Bantu people as well, not a Semitic people. You see?
Really?
Mm-hmm.
The
They're connected.
Somalians, Somalians are hardcore. The Somalians, like on Clubhouse, the Somalians and the Ethiopians have a real beef with West Africans.
Yeah. And and the thing about it is that they have classified us in different ways. You know what I mean? And a lot of it has to do with the land masses being carved up. Sometimes they take one group of people and split them up in two. Like when they had the British, British invasions, or when they would actually take one part of land, they divide the land right up between one group of people. And next thing you know, this one group of people have become two different groups of people, where they may give one more benefits to the other and deprive the other one. Next thing you know, they're fighting, right? So they did the same thing in Los Angeles and divided Black communities up with a freaking highway.
Yep, they did the same thing in Kansas City too.
You see? So if we're looking at things, you see this pattern, right? But what we have to understand as people of African descent, as long as we are not paying attention to the games that's being played, we are going to continue to see each other as the enemy. We have to learn about history. We got to learn about geography. We got to learn about trade routes. We got to study language. So this has put us into a situation where we have to really be on top of the game, because your children, right? Your nieces and nephews, they're getting their information off of social media.
Yeah. And go ahead, brother.
We're actually on social media right now, right?
Yep.
What does this mean? We got to get on social media and we got to get out there more often ourselves, because a lot of times we tend to look at these things and not get involved in, we just let it slide. But if you got information, you got knowledge, if you're not putting it out there, if you're not putting out the truth, then you're going to have people that's going to come out and put out the lie. And
that's the big, and you know what, that's kind of what we're dealing with today, honestly. Like, and then I guess that's kind of the big thing with the scholars versus, and then I remember being in Seattle, this always being a thing, the scholars versus the brothers and sisters that was the average brothers and sisters in the hood. The ASCAC people didn't really mix with the brothers and sisters in the hood, so to speak. And so that was a problem. And I guess you're kind of still running into that problem today, whereas you don't have many scholars getting on here. Dr. Carr is the only scholar I really know that's really getting on social media. He's doing it in a high level capacity, being on the Roland Martin show. But he's the only real scholar that I'm aware of, besides, you got the House of Consciousness, and you got Dr. Reggie and all that stuff. But and then Brother Jabari. But beside those brothers, they all kind of roll in the same crew. But Dr. Carr, he's from ASCAC. He was the leader of ASCAC, and he's also, he's on the Roland Martin show. Promoting, his information, his knowledge, his wisdom. He's also on another person's show as well. I forget the sister's name. But he's out there putting forth the information and making the connections with the people, getting this information out. And then, but that's a high profile, person. It needs to be just a movement of different people. That's what makes this information spread, where it's not just one high profile, prolific, speaker and intellectual that's talking about history. It's all of us, spreading information and wisdom about the African cultural connection. And then at the same time, as we are promoting this African-centered consciousness, we have to deconstruct the Western, biblical paradigm as well, because that is a big issue, brother. Like, I was earlier watching Sinetta TV, and this brother is on there, like the Hebrew paradigm. They, before it wasn't a big issue, but now I'm starting to see like they are trying to usurp all African traditions and call them Hebrewisms. And there's this narrative where they're trying to say that all African people are Hebrews, and it erases our connection to our history, and it connects us back to this mythological past that we can deconstruct and see is built up off myth. And so we have to, it's like we have to do just double work. We have to break through the paradigm, the Western paradigm of the biblical tradition that's already in our people's minds. We have to get them out of Christianity, and then we have to also, discuss the true relationship, the true historical relationship of Judaism and Africa, because there is a relationship there. But what is the true historical relationship of Judaism and Africa? Because it's just a lot of information, a lot of misinformation, a lot of appropriation of African cultural traits and values, and then importing them into the biblical narrative. And that's another thing that we're gonna have to strive to set straight. I don't know about fighting against, but set it straight. Because this biblical narrative is deep within our people's consciousness, especially our African brothers and sisters.
So is our methods. Just because cats left the church doesn't mean they stopped having church. Am I making sense?
Mm-hmm.
Here's the thing. We replaced the pastor with the professor. Now, what it is that at first we listened to a brother preach to us, right? Stand behind the podium. Now we got the professor, breaking things down. He's standing behind the podium too. Only difference is that there was the faith-based. We was thanking Jesus, hallelujah, with the faith-based stuff. Now it's intellectual. Like, that's right, brother. Break it down to us, brother. You see what I mean?
Okay.
The thing about it, though, at what point in time does it get participatory? And what I mean is this. Okay, how do you live an African experience, right? I'm not knocking that we're still having church. I love me some Black conscious intellectual church. Okay, I call it Black conscious intellectual church because that's what we're still doing. We just ain't calling ourselves Christians. Okay,
mm-hmm.
but a lot of times we might as well be doing that if we're not going to take it beyond just that. So how do you basically make it participatory? There's such thing in African culture that's all over the African continent called the masquerade. How come we can't organize a masquerade? They do it in Mardi Gras down there in Louisiana, right? Well, so how come you can't get Black people together and perform some type of ceremonial event and say, I've partaken in this culture, I've partaken in African culture. You see what I mean? A time where everybody get together and they eat in a certain way. But you see, you can't just throw a broad blanket on top of African culture because there's variations in African cultures, obviously. But one thing that seems to be universal is dancing and singing and homage to the ancestors, right? This is before the advent of the Abrahamic traditions. But even the Abrahamic traditions, they still pay homage to who they imagine their ancestors to be, right? They pay homage to, they call it the Trinity of prophets, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right? So, then they talk about the lineage Adam and Eve. As far as they're concerned, indirectly, they're still paying homage to what they consider to be ancestors. Whether we want to say Abraham was a mythological person or whether they want to say he existed, they believe so. So when you basically do a participatory ceremony where people are basically doing drumming, dancing, and singing, right? And then you're feeding people, that's one way to grow something. Asar didn't go around just lecturing. Asar got people to participate with music, song, poetry, and dance. That's how he was able to build things because people didn't feel like somebody was sitting around talking at them all the goddamn time. He got them involved.
That was my issue when I was a part of ASCAC. I was like, because as the brothers and sisters that, and there's this there's this big push to just study history, and that's not what made our people great. That is only a part of the greatness of our people. We always had a historical connection, but we had culture. Culture is kind of what I envision you talking about. And then there's this conversation that you know, just having historical information is enough, and it's not. Like you are right.
It's not.
We have to learn the participatory practices of African cultural traditions.
That is correct. You see, like when they have the Kwanzaa events where they get the children doing arts and crafts, these are beautiful things. You see, you got to get some hands-on stuff going. We're talking about people working with African traditions. You know, you can have people pour out a libation as they call upon the names of the ancestors and upon their heroes, or go to the river or go to the waters and get people to do that. That's another way to study. Saying, okay, this is how they did it, this is how we're doing it now, and people have more of a feel to it. You see, but the thing about it, you know, there's sometimes when it's good to have people read and swim through the books, but not everybody is a reader. So
Yeah.
maybe it's up to the people who are the readers, right, to discipline themselves enough to create methodologies where they could take people through these experiences. You see, how do we develop our character? We talk about Black men and women having a family structure. Okay, then why is there no more instructions on what it means to transcend just romanticism and to actually start loving? Because people think love is everybody just got it in them, and next thing you know, you guys come together and people are supposed to read each other's minds, know exactly what they want, and it doesn't work like that.
Not at all. Doesn't work
Love
like that
is
at all.
Let's stop looking at it as just some mystical force that everybody has and everybody else instinctively knows how to do, and see it as a skill that needs to be developed. So Black men and women know how to talk to each other better, how we know how to get along better and see each other as a team, not as competition, or all these unrealistic ideas of what intimacy is supposed to mean, right? And how you know, we always supposed to be perfect without ever making a mistake. We have to allow each other to be human. So there needs to be all classes on that, on basic things like that, because no matter what you keep on talking about, if you always argue with your woman, how you gonna have a culture?
Exactly.
And the kids see you guys arguing all the time. You talk about economic development. Your kids ain't listening to you because they see that you ain't getting along with your significant other. You see what I mean?
What
So
you're kind of discussing, like, you know, rites of passage, you know, the rites of passage that we used to have in our cultures and our traditions.
very important, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we keep talking about a Sar and a Set or a Heru and Heteru. You see what I mean? How do we embody these beings? How do we embody what they're supposed to have represented? You see what I mean? How you gonna give birth to a Heru, you know, to a warrior, if you don't have anything there to nurture him and something to discipline and train him?
No doubt.
You know, or get the young sisters, you know, and show them, you know, how the elders, the women, the female elders in the community would take and nurture these young, the girls into young women and teach them how to tap into their femininity. You see what I mean?
Yep.
So you know, one thing, and I'm gonna just go ahead and say it. I like the Nation of Islam's program with their civilization classes. They got the FOI because they understand this. They got these brothers training and learning how to become the protectors of the women and everything else. They working out. They teach them how to do entrepreneurial skills, and they teach the women how to knit, sew, and take care of the home abroad, and how to develop economics and all that stuff.
You know, I've never had a problem with the Nation of Islam in reference to that, because they have been about the upliftment and development of the Black community.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny, like, it wasn't there's something different about the Nation of Islam's approach versus this Hebrew Israelite philosophy. You know, the Nation of Islam, their approach has always been about the development of the Black community, which I can rock with. You know, and it hasn't really been, now they may have some anti-African elements in it, but they don't stress and emphasize that in their theology, not as much as like these other groups do. And so I can 100% agree with you in reference to the Nation of Islam, you know, having a positive program for our people. Now, ideologically and, you know, following their history, that's one thing, but just as far as a group that has a rites of passage program to help you, you know, better incorporate or better work with the brothers and sisters in your community, I think it's dope.
Yeah.
But that's the flaw. That's the flaw of these intellectuals. The people that just think that it's about reading a book. The people that just think it's about the regurgitation of information. They don't understand the cultural content within the culture, the content within the culture that leads to the cultivation of the individual. That's what it's all about. Because, you have to have a culture that'll be able to support the historian as well as the herbalist. You know what I'm saying?
Right,
the herbalist may not be as keen on history as he is on herbs. You know what I'm saying? And we have to develop a culture, develop or embrace a culture that supports both. But those people can come together and still share a commonality. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. And and the thing is, I want people to be clear. I'm not saying get rid of all the intellectuals. We need them, right? We're intellectuals ourselves, right? But you got to have it set up to the point that there is what you call the theoretical and the practical, and these two are both available. You see? Because if you focus on pure theoretical practice, then all you're going to do, you're going to be a great talker. You might make a great poet, might make a great lecturer, but it's kind of like the person who knows how to talk about the car, but don't know how to drive.
Exactly.
You see? So we got to get that aspect married some kind of way. You know what I mean? Now, sometimes people are better doers than they are speakers on the issue. Not everybody is articulate. You see what I mean? So we're looking at the various personality types. And this is where cultivation of the spirit come into play, because you can tap into these different dimensions of yourself that'll be able to activate when the right times are necessary or at the right times.
But see, this is one of the things we're running up against, because these intellectuals, there's this push in the Black, I guess, intelligista community that sees science, the Western form and the Western approach to science has superior to any other form of expression. And so, like what you just said, it's like that when they're trying to phrase it in a negative side. They're trying to phrase, spirituality in and of itself. They're coining negative terms for it, like pseudo and spookism, right? And then any type of indication that there's spirituality associated with your practice, with who you are, they term it pseudo and spookism. And then it's like disqualifying the effectiveness and the authenticity of your practice. But I don't think what they know that what they're doing is they're really anti-African when they talk about spirituality being pseudo. Because the one thing that Africans have, the most powerful thing we have, is our connection to spirit. I mean, but point blank bottom line, you can't study Africa without studying the spirit. You understand? If you just want to look at the historical movements of Africans, you're just looking at you're looking at the water, you're looking at the waves versus studying the ocean. You know what I'm saying?
This is true. This is very true. Well, what about the idea of marrying? Because this is what my Tawi is about. Marrying two things that appear to be different, or marrying the upper and lower, right? To unify the land. Okay, unify the concepts. Why not marry spirit and science and create spiritual science? We already have spiritual science, but let's deal with spiritual science. Let's talk about scientific spirituality. You see, for those who want to deal with the science, here's the thing. There's some states that you can reach that you cannot wrap your brain around. But this is when it comes to taking people into the practicality of it. You're like, okay, I can only talk so much about this. Now it's time for you to get involved and get into this ritual, right? Or there's certain plants that we may partake to get you to certain levels of awareness. You have to be trained. Not everybody should be able to mess with that, because it can mess you up. But if you have someone who is trained in how to work with these herbs, you can find where your mental body or your mind can expand, right? Or you can also find where you may have an ailment and you know the right herbs, but since you're one with the herb because you have went into meditation and you have touched the spirit of the herb, now you know what the herb can do for you.
Exactly.
But this is when you have to take people into the practicality of it. Meanwhile, you learn about how the plants grow, the day of the year that the plants need to be put in or checked on, depending on the species of the plant. You see what I mean? This is African science, right? being able to cultivate a crop, because even, Kemet was an agricultural civilization. The Yoruba were agricultural. I believe the Dogon are agricultural. A lot of your major civilizations in Africa were agricultural. Some aspects of Africans were nomadic. And even the nomadic people, they had an idea of astronomy. They had to keep track of the stars and so forth, you see. So, we don't always have to be all super woo-woo when talking about things. If you feel that there has to be a scientific expression of it, just understand that science goes so far. And also belief only goes so far. So what you have to do is you have to marry the two and get them to have a direct experience.
And see, I think the marriage of the two is African spirituality. And we have to emphasize that African spirituality was, now there is some mysticism in African spirituality, of course, it's everywhere, but it's built upon the principles of science and spirit merging together. Or another way of saying that is understanding how energy interacts with the physical world. Energy and energetic consciousness interacts with the physical world. That's what we're studying. When you said how a certain plant grows, I'm looking at how a certain plant uses energy available in its environment at a specific time. That's what happens. That's what spirituality is. It's understanding how to work with the energetics of a situation. And that's one. And then how to transform your consciousness to reach different states within your conscious being. That's two. You know what I'm saying? Those are different aspects. Those are different ways of working with spirit. And so, and then and then that's what, there's a proverb in ancient Kemet that said, study the sky and study the earth in order to know yourself, in order to know, know what I'm saying? And so but the emphasis was on study, was on knowing. It didn't say believe in the sky, believe in the earth. It said study. Study the sky and study the earth so that you may know yourself. I got to get the right exact quote, but it was in the teachings of Kagame. And so, but the very fact that you're saying study, when you study something, that means you're looking at the dynamics that make that thing itself. You know what I'm saying? So you're going to have a scientific approach to it. This is why ancient Kemet was the beginning of the sciences, because it was the wisdom, the African wisdom, which allowed the Kemetic mind, or the African mind, to study the world, to come up with emergence of spirituality and science. So we have to get these people that are out here talking, when all they're promoting is the reading of history, they're really doing you a disservice. They're really not understanding themselves that Africa's greatest contribution to world history is its spiritual sciences, its spirituality. You know what I'm saying? Africa's greatest, Africans and Africa's greatest, what am I trying to say? Tool, Africa's greatest, what am I trying to say? It's not its contribution, but one of the greatest things that it has is its understanding, and it's a connection, and its attunement to universal consciousness and spirituality and energy. That is the greatest thing that the African has had, and that's what the African has always used to move through space and time. You know what I'm saying?
Correct. I say, and also understanding that you are not disconnected from that which you are observing. That there's a connection between you and what you're observing. There's a connection between the subjective aspect of you and what appears to be objective.
Yep, no doubt.
The objectified reality being a reflection of the stories we tell ourselves, and at the same time, where we are at spiritually. Everything in our environment is a lesson for us to reflect upon.
No doubt.
We continue to go through repetitive cycles in our lives.
Yep. Our spirituality, our approach to life has to be able to inform us on how to live a better life.
Correct. You see, and situations that we get into that will force us to adapt.
Yep. Exactly. 100%.
You see, so when the Africans were captured and brought to different lands, or when they were colonized upon their own lands. A lot of times, everything was stripped, and all they had left was their wits. But their wits were also guided by something within them.
Yeah. You know what, brother? There is definitely an ancestral consciousness that's there and that guides you. I brother, so you know that I have been writing a book, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and at the moment, I've connected in my book, in my work actually, the there's 8 dominant figures in geomancy, right?
Mm-hmm.
With the Ogdode of the Menphite theology, right? And then let me show you something, brother. Hold a second. Actually, I don't think I don't have it on this computer. Hold on one second. Dang. Oh man, I'm not even logged in. All right. So through the in the spiritual system, I have this diagram. Can you see it?
It's kind of blurry. I can't really. I see a circular pattern, but it's really fuzzy.
Yeah, let me see something.
And I think it may have something to do with your lighting behind you.
Yeah, it definitely does. Hold on, let me check something out. But anyway, there's a circle, and then I've aligned and have been understanding how to put the 8 dominant figures of Kemetic geomancy on the circle that's related to the seasons, right? And then when I looked at that circle, I looked and it's the exact same circle that I set up Howard's Garden in.
Yeah.
You know,
it's important that you picked up on that circle too. I want to talk to you about that, but please continue.
Yeah, it was when I was doing Howard's Garden, I wanted to do the Kikongo Cosmogram, but the way the situation worked out was when I got the grant money, there was 8 garden beds that came with it. And so then what I ended up doing was, making a circle with 8 garden beds with the tree of life in the middle, right? And that was back then, that was over 10 years ago. And then,
okay.
Yeah, so then that's what I did. Now, as I was working through, when I was coming up with this, when I was learning geomancy and I was studying it, something told me to focus on the 8 figures, right?
Yeah.
Something, because then I looked at it, because geomancy in the West and the many other forms of geomancy, like in the in India and in the West, they focus on the house chart, right? Which is the astrological part of geomancy, where a certain figure falls in a certain house and it means a certain thing, right? But when I was studying how the Africans used it in like Madagascar and in certain Islamic countries, they focus in on just the initial chart, the shield chart. And then and then when you focus in on the shield chart, there's like 63,000 something odd combinations that you can come up with, right? But all of these combinations, there's only 8 figures that can be produced at the end. But there's all these different ways of arriving at these 8, and of those 8, and so something just told me, like, if the Africans are focusing in on these 8, let me focus in on these 8. Now that was a long journey that led to the development of the book. But then a little while ago, I was like, thinking about how these 8 are related to the cycles of the universe.
No doubt.
And I'm seeing this, and then that's how this diagram, kind of emerged out of this consciousness. And I'm like, whoa, this is dope. And then then it just dawned on me. It dawned on me the other day. I was like, this is the exact same diagram I set up at Howard 10 years ago. It was like the ancestors were telling me to develop this. You know, there's something there. There's something that is in this 8. You know what I'm saying? And then, that was, I was like, wow, I can't make this stuff up, man. I even put the diagram of the initial Howard Garden in my book. Like I redid my book and put that diagram there. Like, I can't make this up, brother. Like, that joint is dope. I'm trying to push this 8 as, you know, the 8 energies, you know, of the Ogdo, you know, the fire, air, earth, and water, you know, positive and negative aspects of it. It has the Ogdo of the Menphite theology. You know, I have to trace that, but I'm getting very close to understanding that as being a source. You know, so I just have to find, you know, more information related to, you know, Egyptian theology, like that says, you know, the expression of the 8. But
yeah.
Go ahead, brother.
Yeah, no, I'm saying study of the Shivaka Stone. This sounds like there's this heavy echo in the background too. Can you hear it? Okay, just want to make sure.
My part or your part?
Clear. Okay. Oh, nothing. Okay. Now I thought I heard an echo for a minute, but what I was saying is that when we deal with the Kemetic system, and we're looking at the 8 aspects of what I call the primordial energies of creation. You got 4 male, 4 female, right? And we also see this similarity within the Dogon cosmology, where they talk about the 8 ancestors. And then you go into the Yoruba system, which, interesting enough, it starts off as an entity beginning as 1, splits into 2, splits into 4, splits into 16, and so forth. Next thing you know, you got a combination of 256 different combinations, right? This is in the Ifa tradition, which they have the divination system, right? And it also talks about the creation, how it splits into 4 and eventually divides into 16. And you can take these variations, these various patterns, right? And you can divine with them.
Yeah.
But you can also use that, just like in geomancy, to see the outcome of an event. So it's a very natural, spiritually scientific way to connect in what I would call a practical probability method, dealing with African spiritual science, the ability to compute the outcome of an event and then come up with the remedy, which is connected to a deeper level of our consciousness.
Yep.
And this consciousness pervading every one of us, right? So the Yoruba tradition, they talk about the Ori. The Ori, they call the head the Ori. There's an aspect of your Ori that's the higher self, they call it Iponri, right? And Ori is also considered to be a part of God, which is within each individual. They say that God, if you want us to use the word God, they actually say Olodumare or Olorun, right? You know, or whether it's Mawulisa or, Nyami or so forth. We looked at this all-pervading being, which leaves a part of itself here amongst us, but it continues to elevate, it continues to create. And, a lot of times when you look at African cosmologies, they'll say that the creator left a part of itself here to govern earth, or left aspects of itself here to govern earth while it left and did other things. In other words, the Africans seeing this entity as so vast, so great, you cannot just grasp all of it. There's always more.
There's more. It's, and then, brother, okay, and you hear me talking about this, and this is kind of the route that I'm going to take. When I did my presentation on Sa-Neter, I talked about Eugnostus being an Egyptian document, that was pre-Gnostic, part of the Gnostic and pre-Gnostic traditions. And in Eugnostus, that's what it talks about the creator as being incomprehensible, being indescribable, incomprehensible, into totality of totalities, right? But that means that it is actually beyond our human conception of what it can be. If something is indescribable yet exists, we can't conceive of what that is. But nonetheless, it is still here amongst us. This is the beauty of continuity of cosmological consciousness in African culture. I like these little, what is that? Onomatopoeias or whatever that I'm doing. But, yeah, man, but that's what it is, brother. You know, and then the other thing about it, man, like the Oracle system, you remember, now there's been several versions of this Oracle system, but the first version that I created was when I came over and how we were both doing our divination and we came up with something similar. You know, the
Correct.
Oracle, there's that understanding of the 8, the 4, and the 16 is so exact. It's scary almost, brother. You know, it's, you know, my relationship with the 16 and with the Oracle system is one of deep respect, like, and just understanding like its accuracy. You know, I did a reading the other day for a brother, and the brother called me up asking me to interpret a dream for him. Like, and I know now that whatever question the person has, they don't need to tell me anything about the question. Like, all they have to do is hold the question in their mind, and then I can tell them based on, you know, what comes out, what's going on inside that dream or inside that question, you know. And then the accuracy, you know, the accuracy of these 16 figures is so cold. It's like I'm fully aware that there's ancestral energy, there's divine energy behind, you know, the figures, because it's just too cold. And then our computer system is based upon this configuration, you know, this binary code system. It's a code
linked to a cosmic, and we understand it to be linked to a universal cosmic intelligence.
Yeah.
See, here's the problem with a lot of us in the conscious community. No disrespect, but we have to be okay with saying, I do not recall everything. Right? In other words, I don't know everything. Now, there's an aspect of universal conscious awareness that we can tap into, you see. But the reason why we cannot recall everything, or should I say do not know everything, is so that we can make discoveries. Because if you knew everything, could recall everything, there's no meaning to existence for the human being. You see? So we have to be okay with saying, I don't know, because it gives you the opportunity to discover.
Yep.
Hold, please. Hold, please.
Yeah. Just to build off of what the brother was talking about while he's out for a second. You know, the other day, or last week, I was online, and brother Garfield ended up saying, like, you know, I made a mistake in reference to the Annunciation versus the Immaculate Conception, right? And the brother was like, you know, oh, the Immaculate Conception is the purity and the virginity of, you know, the Virgin Mary as she gave birth to Jesus. Okay, I made a mistake with the Annunciation, which was the announcement of the Hatshepsut about to have the baby. And Garfield gonna yell, oh, see, you pseudo. No, I'm not pseudo. I made a mistake in the naming of an event, not the similarity of the story. Like, I have no problem accepting correction, you know, and then furthering the conversation in this correct manner. You know what I'm saying? So when I asked for what the correct name was, he was silent till the next day when he went and researched what the correct name was. See, but it's not like, brother, I was just saying, you know, brother, it's not about knowing everything, but it's about getting deeper into the discovery of how something came to be. You know, that's
exactly.
You know what I'm saying? And I hope, you know, from my conversations and the things that I project and, you know, what I'm engaged in, it's about deeper discovery. You know, how can we, you know, have this conversation to kind of hash out what happened, you know, or what's happening in something.
Ego. It's very simple. Ego. You see what I mean? First of all, we have to allow, we act like we didn't forgot how to allow each other to be human because everybody wants to be God. That's a problem. I'm not saying that we're not aspects of God. The problem is that you have to go through this human experience because nobody is perfect. See, we're hypocritical when we act like we're perfect and we're going to want to hold everybody else accountable. Yeah. So what? So somebody is talking about something and they make a mistake. Only a wounded, egotistical person would jump in on that person to tear them apart in front of an audience.
Exactly.
You see, so if you're coming from a place and you keep on saying, I love my people, then where's the compassion at? If you know that our people have an illness because of what they've gone through. I'm not saying justify their behavior, huh?
I said, there is no compassion. Yeah.
See, so you have to bring that in because you're talking about you want to heal your people. You see? So you can't have it both ways. You can't continue to stomp all over them, claiming that you want to heal them.
Yeah.
Or that oh, well, my knowledge base is better than this person, so I'm going to destroy him. Somewhere along the line, we fell asleep at the wheel. The reason why we have this conscious community is because we want to uplift people. You see what I mean? And we have to store the love, which is the expansion part, into the community. But we're not born with it intact. We have to develop it.
You know what it is, brother, is actually this YouTube sensation stuff.
Yeah.
Brother, so I was another thing that happened these last 2 weeks, I guess now at this point, is Tazariak got on and asked me a question, or asked the Kemetic people a question about what we do in the community. And because of my association with the Sarset Society and the knowledge that Shechem has said, like these YouTube things is not what it's about, I went silent, right? Because I didn't want to say something that might, be misconstrued or anything. There's there's a protocol in the society. So, but it's not spirituality, and the reclamation of the African legacy is not about the debates. You understand? When we're talking about the restoration of the consciousness of our people, there's an arena for the debates, but really it's about the engagement of practices that bring back wholeness. You know what I'm saying? And arguing all the time and just basing your life around arguments isn't the way it goes. Now, part of your life can be about the discussion, but not all of it.
Yeah. And the thing about it is that, some people, they get their jollies off of arguing. I mean, that's basically, I guess, who they are. They're argumentative people, But for those who are interested in actually building something, who wants to make it practical in loving self and loving those around us, then we have to take those steps as well. You see, Brother Tazariak asked the legitimate question, it's a valid question. What do we do, right? Well, I have to answer this question to this degree because we got different teachers, and these teachers have different points of view and methods. The thing about it, as a person who loves, the traditions of Africa, Kemet, and so forth, I could study Ma'at and establish Ma'at in the community. First, I got to establish Ma'at in my environment. You see what I mean? If Ma'at is not established in my environment, you see, if I can't reason with the person I'm with in a relationship, then that's a problem, right? If I'm not doing practical work to get my children back on point, then that's a problem.
Yeah.
Right. So we have to start in the micro, then we expand out to the macro. That's where we add on to ourselves. You see, now, as far as I'm concerned, we did have study groups to raise consciousness. We still, I ask people nowadays, what's stopping you from getting your homies together and, having either a book reading or doing something where you get together and experiment, right? If that is what you want to do, why not create the space for people that are interested? You don't have to be no master teacher or some super scholar to start these things up. Just say, hey, let's get together and read, research. And while you're at it, let's go ahead and have some, vegetarian food or whatever. Or,
exactly.
The Hebrews, they have like a barbecue, so you have to start where you're at, and you got to go for the low hanging fruit if you can't get to start off at the top of the tree, because nobody starts off at the finish line. You see? But I've seen Kemetic people doing things in the community as far as teaching or, distributing incense for younger people to sell incense and so forth, right? Incense oils and so forth, entrepreneurial training, entrepreneurial program, getting together, having meditations, and that's nothing wrong with just that. But also, there's also a sister that have, I believe it's Dr. Ma'at. She had created a program for young people to learn mathematics, right? So there's things that they're doing. I guess the question is how we're going to expand upon it to make it pervasive.
Right. You know, for me, what I was thinking when I was asked that question is I was speaking with another brother about it. And it's not so much about like preaching, you know what I'm saying? Because it's kind of hard to kind of try to preach to somebody that the divine essence is within, you understand and reach the God. I guess it's really weird to go out there and start trying to argue that concept. But what he was suggesting was like, you know, simply going out and then meditating or, you know, doing drumming and then having pamphlets, information pamphlets that let people know about the connection. And I was really resonating with that suggestion. Because
it sounds better than arguing with people all day. Just invite them to an event that you're putting on. Yeah,
no doubt. You know, and you know me, like as far as work in the community, that's not even something that is a question. You know, as long as you and I have known each other, it's just been community orientation. Like both you and I have a strong history in organizing and working with the community. So I really wasn't concerned. I didn't feel a certain way about that question when it was asked. It was just like, how do I answer it, you know, inside protocol. And so that was so, but it has been something that has been on my heart to go out and to try to, and then to show people the connection that they have. But really honestly, brother, I gotta be honest with you. Africa would be just a gateway to God for me.
You
know what I'm saying? Like it would be more or less for me, the biggest motivator for me to go out and talk to people is to show them that the divine essence is within. And then there's been African conceptions or African philosophical conceptions and approaches to life that showed you this. You know, bringing honor back to the legacy of it that is African. Because what you have today, like my own journey is a good example. You know, whereas, you know, in my search, I went into a lot of Eastern traditions first before I circled back to reclaiming the African legacy. Because what I began to notice in the West, like as I'm going to search for the God, you know, and how to try to approach the divine essences within in these traditions, there is a heartbeat in like a denigration of Africa. You know what I'm saying? There's a connection with Africa and savages. Like you read this all throughout the literature, and it's like you can see the racism, although not bluntly stated. You can see racist works or racist ideas at play. And if I hadn't been trained to see that prior to getting into spirituality, that those ideas would just be inside my consciousness without me even thinking about it, and not understanding that it's orienting me more towards like, you know, Eastern traditions versus African traditions. You know, which is
the way I look at that. The way I look at that is that sometimes you have to venture out in order to appreciate what you have at home.
You know, good. That's one way. Another thing, a good thing about what I'm appreciating about African spirituality is like it's not a spirituality that's developed in a vacuum. You know, you are developing and cultivating yourself so that you can be a better member of your community, of your Mbangi, so to speak, right? And so that you can help uplift the community. And if you are somebody who has like a special kind of attunement to God, you're honored in that way, but you're still responsible. You're still a part of the community. You know, like a good example, I kind of hate to bring this fool up, but a good example of like the how Eastern spirituality can go wrong is with this fool Nature Boy. You know, he's the you know, because you have within just people in general, people want to have this, you know, connection with God, right? But they're searching. Now the East, you know, people set themselves up as having this special connection, and then you get this abusive type of situation which occurs in many different environments, right? Not to say that they don't produce bastards. Of course, you know, my teacher is somebody that comes out of that tradition. But you do have this possibility of this craziness that you experience, this abuse, because there's a power ego.
Yeah.
You know, whereas in African spirituality, you are responsible to the community. You know, your
I'm
actions.
gonna tell you something, brother, when you get done.
I'm done, brother. Go ahead.
A lot of these people that practice ATRs are some assholes.
Okay, I'm listening.
Let me keep it real with you. You see, here's the thing. ATRs are beautiful. But the thing about
what is an ATR?
African traditional religions, right? I've been around them for a long time.
Speak on it then.
What I've discovered is that a lot of times people who've never had power before, they feel like they got a taste of power and their egos just go wild. Next thing you know, they're doing spiritual wars and spiritual battles with other people in similar traditions or in other organizations that have the same belief system. There's nothing wrong with the spirituality, or should I say the spiritual science. But the thing about it that's missing, which I think people need to bring into focus, is how to cultivate that inner part. The teachings are available in a lot of these traditions. The problem is that too fewer people want to take that approach because they're interested in the Hollywood voodoo version of African spirituality.
What is
I didn't say
Hollywood
the indigenous. Sticking a pin in a doll to get people to do what you want them to do, right? Rolling an egg on the table with somebody's name on it so they can fall in love with you, right? I'm not calling these superstitions. What I'm saying is that the problem is that people are attracted to that as opposed to the cultivation of the spirit. So what needs to happen, like what I do like about Bobby Heru and Krasamarsi Patat or Shekham's work is that they encourage to cultivate that inner part of your being by awakening different aspects of yourself through trance and basically awakening aspects of your life force, right? Understanding the idea of reprogramming or getting rid of programmings that do not serve us to enhance our connection with spirit. A lot of people who are getting into these ATRs, they're not doing that.
You know what, brother? I can remember when I was at Howard, man, and I was promoting. When I was at Howard, I was just doing meditation, yoga, and gardening, right? That was my whole kick. You know what I'm saying? But I can remember so many different people coming up to me with the requests of, like, you know, helping them get rid of somebody that's like chasing them or stalking them, or, you know, what can they do about cleansing their, you know, the house of energies. And there was all of these other things that were outside of that were outside of it, but it wasn't related to like sitting down, meditating, and then following a disciplined lifestyle. It was more related to like wanting a ritual in order to get. So like, and at the time that I wasn't into that at all. And so now, but I can see how these things develop, because I think, and then studying history, this was also a part of Egyptian religion, Egyptian philosophy, Egyptian society, like, and it's a part of African society as well. Like, these are things that people request of spiritual people, you know, but this is not. And so I can see I can see how some people can just emphasize that part of it, the working with energies. You know,
and they want to get into the magic and the sorcery part. You see what I mean? But there's the mystical aspect that's there in all of these traditions, and people have to cultivate that connection. And that is when you go beyond ego. You see, I'm gonna tell you something about trance states, which you already know, but I'm just speaking in general. Right? When you go into that highest aspect of a trance state, whether you work yourself up through a frenzy of dancing or if you're meditating, what happens is that ego is not present. But when you go and do rituals because you want to fight people all the time, which is happening in a lot of these traditions, ego is involved. So people have to understand the difference between what they call the magical and the mystical. Now, a lot of us, we get all caught up in wordplay and shit. So you say the word magic. Oh, we don't believe in magic. The word magic comes from imge, or imagine, or an image, or magi, right? The Magi were the people who connected with the stars, but the ability to also use the imagination and to bring forth a desired result. You see what I mean? So what it is that we know how to do rituals or build up the energy, and a lot of us want to dance around the idea of animal sacrifice to do blood work. That's all of that is a part of most of your ATRs, right? So what ends up happening is people will focus on that. They'll focus on killing the chicken to get the desired result. But what they don't understand is they have not truly completed the ritual because they failed to kill the chicken in themselves.
Mm.
Am I making sense? So what needs to happen is people need to understand what appears to be the outside and how to marry that to the inner work that is supposed to take place. You see, a lot of people are caught up in power and fame, and that's as far as it goes, not cultivating their connection with spirit.
No doubt.
You see what I mean?
Yeah, brother. And so it's very, so what you're telling me though is kind of this need to transcend the ego. You know what I'm saying? It's like, because I related that. So yeah, that's what you're telling me. This because there is a power that comes with having spiritual knowledge. You know what I'm saying? Because people gravitate towards you, and then they reference you as if though you're like some sort of authority. You know what I'm saying? Because we are the divine essence, and we're seeking greater. We're constantly seeking greater connection with that divine essence. Like the scholars is one thing, but the majority of people understand that that there is a part of them that's the divine essence, and they want to align their lives with it.
I mean, and here's the thing: a lot of us who are in these traditions, and for those who want to reach other people, there has to be a sense of certainty.
Yep.
Are you certain what you actually believe, and do you care? A lot of people don't care about how much you know, and they know how much you care. So the thing about it with a lot of us is, we get caught up on we want things to fall out the sky. You got to cultivate that Ogun or that Harakuti part of you and go and face the magic, right? Face the situation and deal with the situation, you see? Or you may have to cultivate that Oshun or that Hetaru energy, right? And bring the attraction power to bring things to you that you want to see, because you cultivated the imagination, but you also have activated within you an attractive charge, connecting you to that six or that part of Heru or Oshango. So you have to do the work to cause an event to go the way in which you want that event to go. You see what I mean? Now, rituals, there's nothing wrong with ritual. Ritual is part of African tradition, you see, but there's an aspect of transcendence there, which goes beyond the ego. We talk about transcendence. You're ending the transcending the ego, the egoic influence that keeps us in a certain level, which keeps us from unifying, which keeps us from hearing each other out, and which keeps us from making discoveries that would take us to the next level or contribute to the common unity, aka community, or even invent new things.
Yes, brother, that sounds, it's getting kind of late here. That sounds like the perfect way to end this, to transcend the ego. That's I think that would be the lesson of this conversation. Because that's what we've been talking about this whole time. There's egoic consciousness that needs to be, regardless of what we get into. It's about our work being the work to help the people.
True. Exactly. So if you want to make a connection to people, you have to develop a love and compassion for the people if you want to make a real connection with them. You see what I mean? And you might have to do things that do not put you in the spotlight for a while or ever. Some people don't even desire to be in the spotlight, and they're doing way much more than the people who are in it 24/7.
No doubt.
See, a lot of people are about lights, camera, action, and drama.
There's a space and time, you know, but you're right. You're right. The best work is done in silence. My most important work has been done by myself.
Hmm.
But brother, on that note, you want to close us out with any last words, brother?
Yes, we're in the month of March, a lot of energy of Aries. We're dealing with war. We're seeing a lot of war around the planet. You see what I mean? Don't get sucked into anybody else's war because you have your own battles. It's an internal battle that you got to win. You see what I mean? And by the way, I'm not going to get too wrapped up in all the Hollywood stuff that they got going on right now because a lot of it's a distraction. But I will say this, people, get into what's going on in your life. You want to transcend your situation, pay attention to everything going on around you, and then build on that. Take out the enemies in your cycle. And I'm talking about the enemies of laziness, the enemies of disorganization, the enemies of gossip. Take each one of these enemies out bit by bit so you can grow.
No doubt.
Transcending in the trance. Go beyond the trance and into your purity of consciousness.
No doubt. With that, brothers and sisters, let me say Uncle Jasaneb.
Uncle Jasaneb.
Light, love, knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. May your walk be a blessed walk, and then have a great one. Hold on one second, brother.